Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and busts. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Many major security lapses have been revealed after the horrible Brown University shooting. And now many more details are coming out about the killer who opened fire on that university classroom and then soon afterwards killed a renowned MIT professor. Well, joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Joe Imperatrice. He is the founder of Blue Lives Matter NYC. Joe, it's great to have you here.
Rita, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Thank you. You too. What do you think were some of the biggest mistakes made by Brown University in this case?
Listen, we're in 2025 going into 2026, and with the university, as much money as they have, that's been said, security was absolutely a fault of theirs, between the cameras, between not having enough armed guards, between having accessibility, and as it just came out, this custodian that supposedly saw somebody canvassing for several months, how does that person and other people potentially get into a building? If it's said, how are they not confronted, their information taken, a trespass notice handed to them? This is a lot of this, in my personal opinion, has to do with the university dropping the ball.
Lots of big mistakes. And let's start from sort of the first one. You brought up the cameras. How could there not be cameras in a major university? And especially that particular building, Joe, was pretty close to the residential area. If anything, that's an important one to make sure there's cameras in.
Yeah, and what schools across the nation, even for little kids going to school, this should be an eye-opener that the liberal mentality needs to stop and that we need to look out for all people, no matter what their beliefs are, religions. We can go on and on and on. Safety needs to be paramount for our kids, no matter if they're elementary school or going to college. The games of not wanting to work with the police officers or hiding information need to be over with, because as we saw here, lives are changed for forever and some are lost. So, schools all across this nation must get on their game, whether it's consulting with the professionals or sitting down with local police, need to understand the severity of having cameras and locking doors and magnetic doors where only you can be accessed, whether with the key card or a code or a fingerprint. These schools across the nation need to get updated, and they need to get updated now.
How much do you think it was sort of DEI or civil liberties groups saying, oh, you don't want that much of an interference? Or was it just lazy? Because in this particular case, the president of the Brown University kept saying, well, it's an older building. We didn't necessarily have it there. We had it in all these. She seemed to be making every excuse in the book.
The problem is with schools all across this nation, and being in law enforcement for 20 years, I saw firsthand how schools do not want to worry or think about the safety of the kids or cooperating or working alongside of police departments across this nation. There are so many investigations that happen daily where investigations can go so much smoother if schools would just cooperate and see the bigger picture of the safety of their children. But unfortunately, they don't. And this is not uncommon. Unfortunately, here we have a high-profile situation where it came out where we're starting to see this. But I hate to say it, but the fact is that schools all across this nation have not really worked like they should with police departments, with security measures. And unfortunately, we see what happens here at Brown University. And I'm not saying that something like this can wholeheartedly be prevented, but it could have absolutely been harder for someone to gain access or maybe even have been deterred if he was stopped, earlier on, if he was, in fact, the gentleman casing that location, walking through hallways, looking into classrooms. No one spooked him, obviously, enough for him to return time and time again.
Yeah, that's a great point, because he felt comfortable enough to keep going, and then he obviously felt comfortable enough to carry out his crime. I mean, that's an interesting point, Joe, because he obviously was looking around, didn't really feel that he got hampered in any way. I mean, obviously, and what's interesting, he went through the effort of changing his name. He went through the effort of changing the license plates, going, all these different steps, changing the weapon, but yet he seemed to feel comfortable to keep coming back and forth. That speaks volumes of their lack of security.
Yeah, and Rita, so what it's been said and proven is when officers sit down and interrogate a criminal, and they sit there and say, why did you or did you not commit the crime? Many criminals come out and say, well, it was the appearance of the police officer. And I'm just saying that in general because it's going to link up to this story with Brown University. But when police officers look professional and they're on their game and their uniforms are squared away and the way they talk is professional but, stern, it's going to deter somebody from committing a crime, right? Same thing if a police officer is sloppy or they're not paying attention or looking at their phone. The same can be said with this school because when this individual walked in, he didn't have a problem walking through the door. He walked through the hallways and wasn't confronted. He didn't feel scared enough to have to provide information. He was able to park or at least, let himself off close to the vicinity of one of the entrances, right? So the same goes here. If security was paramount, if he looked around and saw, wow, my face is going to be seen, because this gentleman did not walk around if it was said like since January, he didn't walk around with a mask for the last 12 months. Obviously he was just walking around like a normal human being. He obviously felt comfortable, like you just said, doing this. He wasn't afraid to walk through this door or that door or, a hallway. I would never do that. You know what I mean? I'm a law-abiding citizen. I would never go just walk into a college just because, I'd be very, very scared. So that was a big problem here.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Great points. And also, according to that custodian, he was sort of lurking around, looking into classrooms, even went into that particular classroom. And you're right. I mean, what kind of a person is roaming around so much so that the custodian's seen him multiple times? And he's obviously older than the average college student. You would think he would have stood out like a sore thumb, but I guess nobody cared.
And it's sad, Rita, because no matter how old your child is, right? As you know, your child can be 40 years old. They're always going to be a baby boy or baby girl, right? Nobody should have to worry when their child goes to school. Once again, at an early age or a college age, they should know that they're completely safe, that there's no issues whatsoever, that they're reassured during all these orientations that, hey, your child gets left off here, we're going to treat them like one of our own. And listen, we're not saying you're putting cameras in bathrooms or, certain locations. That's not what we're saying. But at access points where the average person can walk, there should absolutely be video surveillance in every part of that school, and that will save the time of investigators down the road also. Rita, it upsets me because in this day and age, we're so used to having your phone right in your hand. You click a button and you get whatever you want. You Google it, you ask Siri. That's the problem that's hindering law enforcement nowadays is everyone still thinks that, well, the officer should know it's only an hour into the case and it should be solved. They should know. Where's the forensics? It doesn't work that way. So right off the bat, everyone's going to have a bad taste in their mouth or look as if you're watching a police officer show when they solve it in 30 minutes in one episode. And, yes, smaller police departments, they're not used to investigating high-profile incidents like the NYPD or LAPD or Chicago. But you also just can't release everything to be able to tip off the criminal as well. So from a law enforcement point of view, I'm not going to sit here and bash the police department and say, well, they didn't solve it fast enough. Yes. Could they have done things better? Yeah, absolutely. But, when you hear them come out and say or individuals say, well, they didn't do enough or they didn't do this or that, I'm not saying cut them slack for not dealing with this stuff, on the average. But at the same time, you cannot release every single piece of information while you're conducting this investigation either.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have an idea who the suspect is, you don't want to tip them off. It seems like in this case they didn't, which was why they put the video out. You know what's amazing, Joe, is also it seems like a lot of the video that came out was from Ring cameras, from neighbors. I mean, it seemed like the best pieces of information came from a Ring camera, came from eyewitnesses. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. And a homeless guy, which we'll get to in a moment. But what do you make of the fact that it was almost Ring cameras that seem to have some of the best footage? And you couple that with what happened with Tyler Robinson. That's the Charlie Kirk shooter. And obviously there was some good Ring camera footage there too, but they had some great surveillance footage where you could see him going up the stairs, doing this. I mean, like one place had a limp, didn't have a limp in another. It seemed like there, right away, they had the picture, so much so that the parents said, oh, that's my son. They recognized Tyler Robinson, and I got him to turn himself in. Imagine if they had much better in this case, especially if it was someone who was casing the university as frequently as this guy was, and a former student.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And even with the New York City Police Department and police departments locally, Ring cameras aid in so many investigations. We think, well, I'm going to get a Ring camera because I want to know if someone's going to steal my package or who's at my front door. But you don't realize that you can be helping someone else, a family that you've never met, just by someone walking across your, front pathway or something along the lines of that. It helps police departments everywhere on a daily basis. Investigators, detectives rely on that information because you would think, all right, it's going into 2026. New York City must have cameras everywhere. Rita, do you know how many times officers go and check and be like, how the hell is there not a camera here? And that's why it's important with the community policing side to go to all these business establishments, local meetings, people that live in neighborhood and say, hey, please consider putting this up. If I was in politics, Rita, I'd be putting rebates out left and right for people to do this because it helps in investigations when things like this go terribly wrong.
One thing, too, is that in this area there in Rhode Island, they apparently set up a whole new system. That was one of the things the chief of police said. Oh, we set up a whole brand new system. And yet they were trying to get people centralized so that they could watch it in real time. And so universities could plug into it. The police department could see it in real time and react quicker or have much better, obviously, visuals. They didn't sign up for it, Brown University. So it seems like there was just a lot of lackluster effort, if any, by this university. They had like a system right there at the tip of the iceberg. Apparently there was a whole bunch of technology associated with that and real-time sort of problem solving, and yet they didn't follow up with it. And I remember the chief of police said, we were going to wait for universities. We hadn't heard from them yet. They kind of hadn't gotten around to it.
Well, this is why police departments everywhere need to be proactive, not just with putting handcuffs on people, but going out there in the streets and letting people know the importance of what technology can do and how it helps in law enforcement. We cannot continue to slip and cost people their lives. This is the problem now Rita, which really bothers me. Even with this university, they didn't realize by not thinking that security was paramount, it cost people their lives. Now, not just with the individuals that literally passed on, but there's people that are going to be seriously injured that are going to affect the rest of their lives till the day they die. They have to live this way. So being sloppy, trying to save a couple bucks, having this liberal mentality that, no, we're not going to cooperate with the police or this stuff will never happen here, it genuinely is affecting people's lives, and that mentality needs to end.
How much do you think that there will be some lawsuits coming up? I mean, it seems like parents and those who lost loved ones, in particular students, like you said, that are in the classroom, that are going to be traumatized for life also, you would think that they're going to say, here's a lot of maybe recklessness or negligence.
No, there's definitely going to be lawsuits, and you can't blame the families, but it's not going to bring back their loved ones. You just hope that they correct the situation better than if they did it before so that this doesn't happen ever again. But, Rita, you hope this isn't just for Brown University. You hope that, universities and schools everywhere wake up. I have a very close tie to Uvalde, the Uvalde school shooting, where I actually met the father of one of the little boys that went to school and was killed that day. How do we not have security and security parameters in our schools to where we let our kids go to somewhere thinking that they're going to come home at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you got to get a phone call that a tragedy like this happens? There's no excuse for it. Those days of making excuses or saying you don't have the money or whatever, it's gone. You can't bring back someone's life, and you really have to sit down and say, how do we fix this? What are we lacking? Let's walk around the campus. Let's walk around the classrooms. Let's see, where the fence may be open. Do we have to put somebody, a school teacher or faculty member or security member at the front gate so that maybe it deters somebody, and we have, security measures coming in and seeing who the individuals are. But no one thinks about this stuff until something bad happens.
And case in point, by the way, I think so much about Uvalde. It must have been so powerful to be there with that father and to hear just heartbreaking, of course, too. Wow, Joe. As we're talking, too, about this case, this custodian comes forward, right, and says that he saw this guy multiple times, that he thought he was suspicious. He thought something wasn't right. He obviously had a good intuition. And he went apparently to, it's a security vendor on campus. It was like an outside vendor that's there handling the security. And they said, we don't really handle that. That's not our job. So I guess it was nobody's job.
It was someone kicking the can. I would open up an investigation right away. And that custodian, if he is legitimate about what he's saying, and that is the individual that did commit this heinous crime, I would have my guy sit down with him nonstop from beginning to end and get a detailed timeline of what happened. Who did he speak to? Then I'd speak to the person that he supposedly spoke to. Why didn't you pass this along? And I'd commit a whole investigation to who messed up, and someone would be held accountable. Because once again, people kick the can. They think, not me. It won't happen in this small town. And now we see the what happens at the end of the day, where going into the holiday season, families aren't going to be able to celebrate with their loved ones. It's inexcusable. The sloppiness needs to end, and people need to be held accountable.
What do you make also of this homeless guy, too? Because it seems like the custodian and the homeless guys appear to be some of the real heroes in this case. And the homeless guy was essentially living either there in the building or in a dorm. What was a homeless guy living on a college property, who I think he was a former student, and he's the one who turns out to say, hey, I saw that guy that day. It turned out to be him who was in that video that was released, Joe. That's a wild part of this, too. Either did they know a homeless guy was living, I guess, on college campus or not on college campus? Either way, it's pretty troubling.
Well, absolutely amazing story, and I know in law enforcement, some of the people that are on the street that you actually become friends with are the ones that are going to help you out with investigations, or, God forbid, you end up wrestling with somebody one day or giving information that you need. Yes, it's troubling in the fact if this person was absolutely living there, is anyone in Brown University actually working and doing what they're supposed to do? But you kind of have to thank God that person was actually around to be able to lead this investigation and help out and confirm certain things. So, yes, it's a little bit of a give and take with this situation, but some of the best information you get are from the people from the streets. And thank goodness that somebody was there to understand, to see, and actually remember and be cognizant to be able to give some good, credible information to law enforcement. Yeah,
you were just saying, I guess that's happened a number of times where he seemed to have a really good reflection. I think he made the make of the car. He said it was like, a silver, the whole deal, and that it had X amount of license plate, that it was from X state. That license plate changed again, too, from the guy seemed to be very crafty, the killer. But it is pretty impressive, right, what he did. And then let's also talk about what the suspect did. My goodness, change his name, change the weaponry, change the license plates. It seemed like he did a lot of pre-planning.
Rita, what upsets me with situations like this and the big stories we see across the nation is, where is the family? You're telling me that you didn't see some kind of change that kind of made you scared or wonder, hey, is my loved one going to go out there and do something crazy? Where are the friends or the wives or the husbands? There's no way that nobody sees the change. And because of not taking that step to go and get them help or sit down and at least have the police, check the person out, this is a problem that we're seeing over and over and over again. But to put that much time and effort, right, almost hyper-focus on the situation. Obviously, this man planned this out in his head over and over again. He knew where he was going. He knew, that he was going to have to disguise himself and his vehicle, right? He had the, storage unit and all this stuff. It was pre-planned. So where were the people around him? Was there social media in this case? Was there someone he confided in? Where the landlord, what the landlord see? I'd go and, during the search warrant of the home, which they obviously did, I sit and say, what happened here? But we can't wait till it's too late. It's almost like, Rita, people are afraid to open their mouth nowadays. But the problem is more bad can happen from it. So we have to almost enlighten people and empower people to say, do not be afraid. Worst case scenario, it's nothing. Best case scenario is you prevented a lot of bad from happening.
Yeah, great point. People need to come forward because it's not like somebody just snaps and then goes out and plans this and suddenly over a course of several days goes and kills at two different scenes.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you make of the potential motive, Joe? Because it seems like we don't know. He didn't leave a manifesto from what we've heard, but we've heard that from friends that potentially he resented Brown, that he was smarter than Brown and felt like Brown didn't appreciate that. He dropped out after a certain amount of time. And I don't know the professor. I'm just surmising maybe he resented him because he did really well. They went to school together, as we know, in Portugal. And the professor at MIT became a huge success. And this other guy, by all accounts, did not. Is there a sense at all, do you think, could it potentially be leading that way? And how do you delve into motive, especially after the fact? Because he took his own life, according to authorities.
Well, it's very hard, come from a law enforcement, point of view, because you want to sit down and have the person tell you themselves, because you don't want to come out and start putting words into this person's mouth, almost like the Luigi Mangione, just off the wall, to be able to put this story in your head and make somebody the villain, and then be brave enough to go out there and carry out this crazy act in your head where it takes somebody or multiple people's lives, So you hope that they're able to tell the story. You don't want to put a false narrative out there. If it never comes out of their mouth, to be able to say what a motive is, unless it's black and white. But it's crazy because even me in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know if these two situations are tied together. It was coming out before it was officially done. When they said it, I was like, wow. I'm like, that's something. Because what they say, Rita, something within like 50 miles of each other and things like that. And there's so many crimes that happen in between that mileage that have nothing to do with one another. And for that to happen, once again, this was planned out, and whatever this gentleman put in his head pushed him to the limit, and it never makes it right, no matter what it is, We know the world is a cold and very difficult place, but that doesn't ever allow somebody to go out there and think that they could take somebody's life. That's just off the wall.
It is, and it's twisted logic regardless. I hope we get more answers, at least for the families, and I hope that there will be changes at Brown University and so many other universities, as you so aptly point out, need to follow the cue of making some big mistakes because it could happen in a number of these campuses. Everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this powerful podcast. Joe Imperatrice, who is the founder of Blue Lives Matter NYC. You're terrific, and thank you so much for your insight, and thank you for all your great years of service, too, Joe. You're one of the best. Thank you.
Rita, thank you so much. God bless.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.